So, with no more delays, I'm happy to welcome you all to this seminar by the Schiller Institute. I want to thank you all very much for coming. We have this title, Can There Finally Be Peace Through Development Between an Independent Palestine and Israel and the region? Build the Oasis Plan now. And this is a very special occasion because His Excellency, Ambassador, Professor Dr. Manuel Hassassian, who has since 2019, I think, been the Ambassador of Palestine to Denmark, has chosen to honor us, speaking with us here today as one of the last things that he ends up doing here in Denmark before he goes into retiring to East Jerusalem, where I'm sure you will be involved in many different things. Sure. The ambassador has been also we have been very grateful for his collaboration on the issue of how to stop the atrocities in Palestine, but also with what we have been moving forward, which is the idea of an Oasis Plan, not just saying the bad stuff has to end somehow, but also what should take over. How can we have a development perspective for a coming independent Palestine, but also for the whole region, as the only way we can see that you really can move this whole thing forward. And then we also have LaRouche that has come up from Germany to afterwards speak on these matters. The ambassador has only an hour slot for us, so he will speak first, and then afterwards we will take questions to Hassassian, and then afterwards we will give the words to Helge, and then, she's the president, founder of the Schiller Institute, and a little later I will come with more of her merits, we'll say that for them. So Michelle, just one thing, we will be recording it. Normally we would have this under the Chatham House rules, that you can reference what's going on. Nobody will be quoted for questions or comments or whatever they say. But due to the circumstances, we want to record it, and whatever we do with that recording will always anonymize anybody else than Helge LaRouche and myself and Ambassador Hassassian. Because since there will be a lot of people that are not able to come, and that this is, I think, an extremely important discussion, so we would like to give other access to it as well.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm always pleased to share with you ideas, and I have been engaged with the Schiller Institute maybe 2-3 years now, and I became one of their champions. Every time I'm invited to a seminar or to an interview, I never say no. It's not that they have an influence on me, it's because of my deep conviction in the Oasis Plan that prompts me, to talk about it and to relate it basically to development in the Middle East, and in particular when it comes to Palestine. There is always an end to everything. Maybe I will finish my tenureship as an ambassador, but rest assured that I have many other positions that I will really be practicing when I go back home. Professors never retire, and if they retire, they end up writing books and articles and give interviews. So my brain will be always alert to see also the Schiller Institute developing its ideas, and especially, a plan that has been for the last 3-4 decades going on, a sound plan, which I will try my best to summarize it and to relate it to the Middle East in my second part of my discussion today. Because I think it's worthwhile when you are invited by the Schiller Institute, you have to talk about this plan, because this plan is considered to be their basic objectives when it comes to development. Every time there is a debate, which comes first, politics or business? Is economic relations between two adversaries more important than solving the political issues, or is this cataclysmic to the effect that without having a political agreement, there will never be economic cooperation? So it's like the chicken and the egg. Philosophically, we cannot determine what. But I came to a conclusion that both can go in parallel. We don't need to solve our differences politically so as to start, trying to cooperate economically for development purposes. Abject poverty always is the essence of conflict. When there is economic boom, we don't have conflict. Always conflict is a result emanating from two parties that are not in parity with each other. And that's why there is an imbalance when we talk about negotiations or conflict resolution. And this is a very classic case when it comes to the Palestinians. The Palestinians have embarked on a process of negotiation since 1988. It was crowned by the Oslo Agreement. With all its loopholes, we ended up having a more complicated situation where Gaza is suffering from a war of genocide, let alone the West Bank is not spared by the attacks of the settlers and the expansion, like creeping annexation into the West Bank, where it is now rendered, as I always say, an island of archipelago, like a Swiss cheese with no geographic contiguity whatsoever. And we talk about West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem that only comprise 22% of historic Palestine. And we always say that we have made our painful concession back in 1988 when we have accepted the State of Israel and declared our unilateral independence on historic Palestine, which is the borders of 1967, meaning the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem. But eventually, what we have witnessed for the last 30 years is that this process is completely dead now. And talking about a two-state solution is like being in the desert, pretending that there is water, like a mirage. Although it is the talk of the town, although there is no other solution, practically, pragmatically, except the two-state solution, although we have accepted the State of Israel on 78% of Palestine, yet that is also slipping from our hands. So what does Israel want? Israel wants to maintain the status quo, which is occupation plus. They need to take half of the West Bank. Under the rubric of biblical prophecy, this is Eretz Israel, part of what God, the real estate agent, has offered them. So we look now at the situation in Palestine and we see it's impossible. Even through choosing between constraints, which is the pragmatic approach, it's still impossible to see an independent Palestinian state on the territories of 1967. I always say there is a divine intervention to solve this problem, or a miraculous solution to this problem. It seems that we have lost the human touch to get a certain solution to this conflict, that we are resorting to international and divine intervention. It is so unfortunate that we have a weak international community. And it is so unfortunate that we have a broker of peace that proved to be dismal in its policies, because its unwavering support to that of the peace process, which is the United States of America, has proved to be a total failure. And that's why what we witness today in Palestine, Israel, and its cataclysmic effect as a result of such a policy by the United States, we reached to a point of nowhere. So either we need a magic wand to come up with a solution, or the international community, and especially Europe, will shoulder the responsibility and show its political teeth that you, the United States of America, you cannot be the only monopoly, unipolar power trying more or less to control the Middle East and the rest of the world. In the 1990s, we referred to the Americans with the crumbling of the Soviet Union as the unipolar power, and we were so hopeful we called it the Pax Americana. And this Pax Americana came out to be one of the greatest disasters to the people in the Middle East. Now, all presidents of the United States have showed empathy and sympathy to the Palestinian people. But they have never shown political teeth to solve this problem, because they are always subdued by AIPAC and by the Zionist lobby, not only in the United States, but all over the world. And there is an organic relationship between the vested interests of AIPAC and that of the Congress, which I consider to be our enemy. Now, the White House is quite friendly. Sometimes presidents are very supportive, they empathize and they sympathize with the Palestinians, but Congress has been our basic enemy, because Congress drafts the laws, Congress sends aid to Israel, Congress allows arms deal with Israel, and Congress imposes embargo on any nation that is against Israel. So our enemy is Congress, and Congress actually 80% of the decision-making process in the United States is made by Congress. It's not by the chief executive, which is the United States president. So it is a very hard task for us to penetrate or to permeate, as we say, the lobby in Washington. Now, whether I want to call it fortunate or unfortunate, the war on Gaza, which is a genocide, by all definitions, even by Raphael Lemkin, who coined, and he is a Jew himself, the word genocide. It is a genocide that is going on in Gaza. And this genocide brought the public outcry and the support. We have never seen American campuses, except when the war in Vietnam took place, march the streets and made history by stopping the war. We have seen it only recently in the United States of America. And that was, for me, what we call in physics a quantum leap in public opinion and in support of the Palestinian people. Regardless of the machine that the United States has and that of Israel in terms of controlling and guiding what we call the public media, we managed to penetrate that as Palestinians, because the international community cannot turn a blind eye on what is happening on the ground in Gaza and in the West Bank. So we say in French, it's a coup de grâce that such an unfortunate event led to the recognition of the Palestinians and led to the recognition of some European states to recognize the state of Palestine. But it is so unfortunate that still today the Kingdom of Denmark did not make the effort to recognize the state of Palestine. And I'm talking Great Britain, Spain, all these, big powers in Europe had already recognized the state of Palestine. Now, the recognition of the state of Palestine in itself does not preempt the negotiations of trying to put the contours of that state which we call Palestine, because that will be based on a parity negotiations between two states and not between an occupier and an occupied. Because in a situation where there is occupier and occupied, there is a total asymmetry. And that's why we call it the influence of the top dog, Israel, over the underdog. And in this case, the top dog is totally supported by the considered to be the honest broker of peace, i.e. the United States. With all my experience in negotiations, we never negotiated with the Israelis. We used to sit in a table like this, L-shaped, and not political leaders in Israel come and sit and negotiate with us. Military leaders, top brass. They come with maps and with sticks. This is for us, this is for us, this is this, this is this. So it was what we call the diktat of power politics. So we never had negotiations. Negotiations is when there is symmetry, when there is parity, when we look into each other's eyes and try basically to negotiate, believing that you go to the negotiating setup with the maximalist position. But through the process of what we call an area, which is a theory in conflict management, you end up fulfilling the optimum and not the maximum. And both parties will be at the same level. And that's why we have a breakthrough and we have a deal. But you can never have top dog dictating the political situation and the negotiations and believe that there is an agreement. There will never be an agreement. Agreement is based on concessions. You have to make concessions in order to reach the optimum. And just to give you an example, this model of conflict management was developed, and I was one of the participants in this model as far as a practitioner in conflict management. Although my area was the Middle East, but through experience and teaching for 26 years, I developed my skills in conflict management. That's why I'm a cool professor, where I don't antagonize my audience, but I try to find solutions. It's not enough to sit here and try to describe the ugly occupation of Israel. Everybody knows what occupation is. Europe has passed through occupation. Many countries have passed through occupation and racism, South Africa and what have you. So there are plenty of examples. But the effort and the boldness is how to circumvent the process from a zero-sum conflict into a win-win situation. This is the real effort of people who have in mind the mindset of accepting the other while not trying to underestimate their acquiescence of their political aspirations. So this synchronized effort is extremely important, because if you don't make this balance, you end up losing. And we call this theory aria, the musical aria in opera, where A stands for the adversarial position. You come into negotiations with the idea of a zero-sum conflict. Your gains are my losses. And you debate. Let's take the question of right of return in the United Nations. And there is an open floor between Palestinian ambassador, Israeli ambassador, to put their own rationale why the right of return should be possible for the Palestinians. Now, this situation ends up in total adversarial position. You see the negotiators scream, body language. They want to control
the other members of the United Nations through the body language and through the tone to win the battle. And that's why they don't make sense. They start, resorting to all kinds of stupid examples just to score a point. So we call this adversarial position, where you reach a point, it's point blank. There is nothing much you could do anymore. So we take a session, break session, and we go into separate rooms. And we try to rationalize the stupid talk that we had introduced. Does this make sense? Does that make sense? We were fools. That's stupid. So what we call the soul searching, the process of trying to factor in the psychological pressure through taking a rational decision-making process, makes you become more pragmatic, choosing between constraints, and more practical in finding plausible solutions. This is what we call the stage reflexive. You reflect on both sides' arguments, and you come up with a third stage, which is the integrative stage. Now, this is all empty. We look at the glass as half empty when we are in an adversarial stage. Now we look at it as half full. What can we accomplish together by prioritizing our national interest that could be a common ground to start building the momentum of accepting each other and finding a solution? This in itself is called the integrative, or what we call search for common ground. The last part is when you agree, you try to prioritize both sides. Which ideas that are more plausible, you start with the easiest ones. And I'll give you an example. I was engaged in 52 second-track negotiations with Israelis and with third-party Europeans and Americans. And every time we brought the 6 intractable issues. And when it comes to Jerusalem, the first thing, collision, is on the question of sovereignty in Jerusalem. Sovereignty is not a starter. You don't start with sovereignty because each will claim that sovereignty belongs to them. And that's why we say, let's start from bottom up. What do we mean by bottom up? Let's say that we have 2 municipalities, independent, Palestinian, Israeli, and there is an upper municipality like the Vatican, trying to be the last resort in terms, if there is a conflict, you refer to this, what we call the umbrella municipality that will deal in solving the conflicting issues. And that in itself will pave the way, basically to understand that infrastructural development, and here comes the economic part, security arrangements, mobility, crossing from East and West Jerusalem, with clear surveillance to make sure that there are no spoilers. These are the details that you start with in building the momentum. Then the question of sovereignty becomes an important issue, but yet we come up with different kinds of sovereignty. And I've written on this issue long time ago, where I devised 15 models of sovereignty in Jerusalem. And like I tell you, one of them is shared sovereignty. Another one is joint sovereignty. A third one is God's sovereignty. A fourth one is scattered sovereignty. A fifth one is unsovereign sovereignty, and the saga continues. And each I described with its pros and cons. Don't tell me that everything is absolute in this world. For everything there is a solution. It depends on the mindsets. In all second-track negotiations, we managed to find common grounds on the 6 intractable issues that comprise the essence of conflict between Palestine and Israel. But in first, what we call the first-hand negotiations between the politicians on the government level has always been a non-starter. Although everybody knows the solutions to all these issues, we have to be prepared psychologically for what we call the painful concession. You have to be prepared psychologically for the painful concession. And that's why if you go there with an attitude of maximalism, you cannot achieve peace. Conflict will resume. Ladies and gentlemen, wars are quick fixes, but peace is a tormentuous path. It is a process that is very painful. It needs tolerance, it needs political vision, it needs to think outside the box. But if you have the upper hand, like Israel, war is easier for them than negotiations. But also we say war is not a solution. The Ottoman Empire ruled the entire Middle East for 4 centuries. Eventually, there comes a time where it was totally crumbled, and all the countries in the Middle East and Africa and what have you were independent. But we had a different form of colonialism, which is European colonialism, which also did not last long in the Middle East. So, once you know the solution, all you need to do is find the process. And one of the processes of having a breakthrough is something called economic development. And here comes the Oasis Plan. Look, I have so many things written here, but I want always to speak from my heart, and this is what I do. I cannot but prepare myself, but I don't read what I write. Because when I start speaking, I try to be more pragmatic, more closer to your hearts and to your brains than just reading a document where it goes from here and goes out from there. Now, the two-state solution, I just published an article just maybe a month ago. I called it From Reality to Illusion. If you look at the ground today, there is no two-state solution. Nothing left from the West Bank to be independent and to be contiguously geographic contiguity with what we call Gaza and that of East Jerusalem. And it's not that is Gaza is suffering and in war, but also the West Bank and also the East Jerusalemites. So we have a total onslaught on the Palestinian people. Israel wants the geography and not the demography of the Palestinians. Israel wants the historical land of Israel, as they allege, through their biblical prophecy that God gave it to them 2,000 years ago. Are we still in the age of religion, God being a part and parcel of preferring one people against the other? Where is the justice? If God is our reference of justice, fairness, then there is something wrong with our God. What is this chosen people? Blacks, Asiatic, Arabs, Europeans, Hispanic, we are all equal. We are all human beings. And that's why we resort always to the international humanitarian law. We resort to human rights because everybody is equal. No preferences for God. So please, never factor in the religious dimension in this conflict, because our conflict with Israel is not based on religion. And this is the Islamophobia. It's wrong. Our struggle is a national struggle. We are struggling to gain our independence, to fulfill our inalienable right to self-determination, which has been given to every single nation in the world except us. Today, our conflict is considered the longest modern occupation in history. When is it going to end? Why? We had the civilization, we had history, we have geography, we have demography. Why are we denied our right to self-determination? And sometimes they say, Hamas and this and that. What's Hamas? Hamas is an integral part of Palestinian society. Yes, we don't approve of their methods, but they are considered to be opposition to the Palestinian Authority. And in a democratic entity, we have the right to have opposition. You want to tell me that Israel is a democracy only, and nobody attacks the settlers, who are considered to be the counterpart of Hamas? And why do they accept them as part and parcel of their society? And they never criticize them, but they want the Palestinian Authority to criticize Hamas. Where is the fairness in this? Now, as I said, I don't approve of Hamas's ideology, but I cannot deny that they are part and parcel of a resistance movement that they believe in armed struggle. Before them, we, the PLO, believed in armed struggle for 25 years. Then we have realized that armed struggle is not a solution. We were terrorists, now we are not terrorists. Tomorrow, Hamas, when it is engaged in negotiations, and once we solve the issue of Gaza and what have you, believe me, the United States will remove Hamas from its what we call terrorist list. So this is a process. We cannot deny what is on the ground. We have to deal with it. Regardless, you approve or you disapprove of their policies, but you cannot negate them. They are a power to reckon with. Look, they are still there, they have their arms, and they are still, resisting, the occupation. I believe that at this stage, intellectuals and academics have reached a certain kind of a conviction that there is no two-state solution anymore. We have to struggle for a one-state solution, like South Africa, where democracy will be the rule of the game and where it will be the talk of the town. By elections, majority rule, and minority rights. Of course, Israel's one-state solution is occupation plus. They don't believe in the electoral process, neither in accepting the one-state solution as a permanent solution to sustain the longevity of peace in the future. So this mentality of occupation and control and destruction and displacement and the forceful diasporization and the constant killings, they believe that these are the mechanisms of creating havoc and make people voluntarily leave. Ladies and gentlemen, the Palestinians have left in 1948, but they're not going to repeat the same Nakba, as we say, the debacle. Today, the Palestinians inside Israel proper and that of the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem are almost equal to that of the Israeli population. How could they control 7 to 8 million Palestinians living basically in the West Bank and in the adjacent country like Jordan? How can they? They have to find a plausible solution to coexist and to live in conviviality, because this is the essence of security for the state of Israel. Israel, with all its war machines, have never secured its borders, have never secured its internal conditions. As long as there is conflict, Israel is insecure. And that's why the psychological dimension of fear and distrust reigns supreme in the lexicon of Israel. So they have to shift from this part to another part, which is the acceptance of the other and finding a common ground. Security is an obsession for Israel. It's like in mathematics. When you say 10 over 0, it's undefined. Everything is explained and rationalized through the security modus operandi. And that's why they are totally obsessed. And I believe that every Israeli needs a shrink to overcome this obsession of security. And of course, this has something to do with history, with the Holocaust, with the pogroms and what have you. It's not something that is of our creation. What is Hamas compared to Nazi Germany and what happened there? And it's so unfortunate that Israel does not believe in what it's doing as genocide, while we believe in the Holocaust. And we support the Holocaust in terms of being sympathetic to the Jewish people and what they have suffered. And we were amongst the first to receive the Jewish survivors in Palestine, where 99% of the population were Palestinians. All these ships that came to Palestine, we opened our hands and we received them as refugees. But it turned out that these refugees came with a project called Zionism, which is the creation of colonies and displacing the indigenous population. This was shown to us in the last 7 decades. Now, I think I spoke a lot on the conflict, but I hope that I always bring up cheerful aspirations, because if we don't have hope, there will never be a solution. And I always quote the Italian philosopher in all my speeches, because I totally believe in him and in his philosophy, Antonio Gramsci, when he says there is always pessimism of the intellect, but always optimism of the goodwill. So as a politician, as an ambassador, as an academic, I have to be hopeful so as I can be creative. And there is no solution without creativity and innovation. We need to be creative. We need to think outside the box. And we need to exert strenuous efforts in finding what I call Aristotle's golden mean. You don't go to the extreme to solve it, you go to the middle. And that's why we also have in Islam al-wasatiyya, which is the middle. Aristotle's golden mean. Aristotle took it from Islam. It was not his, invention. The question of social equity, social justice, was in Islam before being part and parcel of the French Revolution in the 19th century, where all the philosophers, all the poems, all the poets came out from Europe. And it's the same Europe that is now totally impotent in trying to find solutions to big problems where they are considered to be stakeholders. And I was the first to invent, and I take credit for myself. Sometimes I like self-indulgence when I see people repeating my slogans. The first speech for me in the British Parliament, going back in 2005, I said we like, and of course Britain was part of the EU, I say we don't want Europe to be a payer, because paying is sustaining occupation. But we want them to be players. And players mean to have political teeth in order to make changes. And not to be totally subservient to the diktat of American foreign policy in the region. And I tell you, between Democrats and Republicans, for the last 6-7 decades, we never had any substantial change in foreign policy when it comes to the Middle East. Whether Republicans in power or the Democrats. We call them Tweedledum, Tweedledee. And they have been based on 4 important pillars. 1, the unequivocal support of the State of Israel as a proxy regime. 2, trying to control the oil and the oil prices in the Middle East. 3, try to contain communism, which was substituted by the creating of Islamic fundamentalism. Ladies and gentlemen, Islamic fundamentalism was always supported, and it was created in 1928 by Hassan al-Banna in London. And Daesh was created by Hillary Clinton, just for your information. Because imperialism cannot nourish and flourish only in creating an enemy. The hocus pocus of communism faded, crumbled, so they created another enemy, which is Islamic fundamentalism. And fourthly, try to curb any kind of national liberation movements that they dub as being terrorist. These are the 4 cornerstones. Study them and go through history telegraphically and see to what extent my analysis is absolutely right. There is no change. No change. The change should come from Europe because it is the only power. 29 countries, is it 29 or 28? I lost track. Are the only power that could stand in front of the United States. Although there is some tension between Europe and the United States in terms of policies, in terms of economic interests, but eventually Europe's interest lies much more with the Middle East, with the oil, with the Silk Roads, with the trade. But with America, it is like a strategic ally when it comes to NATO and when it comes to military cooperation. Americans don't care about Europe. They want them to be subdued under their flank and do their business. Americans only care about their own national interests. And believe me, once Israel becomes a strategic liability, they will stop helping Israel. And that's why I always say, Israel, you should make your concession when you are at the crescendo of power. You don't make concession when you are weak. And if you want to be a legitimate Middle East country accepted by the Arab and Islamic world, 59 countries, you should give the Palestinians the right to a state and to their self-determination. And we, the Palestinians, will give them the legitimate birth certificate in the Middle East to be part and parcel of one of us, like the 60th state in the Middle East. So Israel has to make its choices. Prolonging, procrastination, creating conflicts, objective conditions, this is not going to bring peace to the Israeli people. And today the Israeli people are living in a garrison state, in a fortress. They are totally, psychologically constrained. And they cannot really find their freedom by being at war with all these Islamic and Arab countries. Now, 20 years down the pipeline, are the Palestinians going to be still factionalized and atomized and what have you? Are the Arab and Muslim states are going to be also divided? Is the United States of America going to continue 20 years from now as the unipolar power controlling through monopoly over world politics? Are the 2 billion Muslims going to sit idle and watch the desecration of Al-Aqsa Mosque? Things are going to change. Because we believe in the dynamism of history. And history is based on contradictions. And this is where I believe in the dialectical materialism, which Marx has taken from Hegel, that an idea creates in itself an anti-idea. And the synthesis of the idea and its opposition creates a synthesis in an idea which is a combination of both, which in itself becomes the idea where its contradiction comes. And this is the process of development. It is based on contradictions. So there is nothing constant in history. History, for us, is past politics.
You'll need to unlock your iPhone first.
History, as we say, is past politics. And politics is present history. So we can see a Catholic marriage there. There was no politics. It used to be the history of diplomacy, how countries used to relate with each other. This political science, which I don't believe it is a science, because science is based on behavioralism and statistics, but you cannot control the emotions and the psyche of a human being to factor it in numbers. So I don't believe in political science. I believe in political diplomacy. I'm a traditionalist and I claim to be a traditionalist. I cannot try to quantify human behavior. Now, let me finish by just saying the situation in Gaza today is precarious at best. The ceasefire is fragile. Skirmishes are still continuing. Bombing is still continuing. Since ceasefire until today, almost 500 people have been killed. The agreement said 600 trucks should go in. We are getting much less than that. Today, Gaza is suffering from heavy rains, and all these tents are in the air now, and these dire conditions is making life impossible, with scarcity of water, with scarcity of food. The Gazans are still suffering in a very painful way. Trump's 20-point plan, which people refer to it as peace, it's not a peace plan. There is no vision there. It's a ceasefire with certain conditions, but not a peace plan. Now we are waiting for Trump's second stage of implementing his 20-piece plan. And this is what we call the transitional period, where Gaza eventually will be reconstructed, and then the Palestinian Authority will be involved, along first with a governor to Gaza, a new form of colonialism, championed by Tony Blair, but I don't know now if Tony Blair is still on the agenda, because he is considered persona non grata, and I had the experience when he was Prime Minister. I was ambassador in London. And I learned what I call the slicky diplomacy from the Brits. I stayed there 13 years, so I understand their psyche and how they think. Of course, he has been discredited since 2006, when he, with President Bush, they invaded Iraq on the pretext of weapons of mass destruction, and everybody knows around the table there was no mass destruction, no weapons. So he is not, and he was the head of the quartet, and he achieved nothing, as far as we are concerned. And now he is being imposed to become the governor of Gaza. Not running it from Gaza, but from Egypt. So we don't know where that stands. And you know, there are many, many international countries that they don't want to be involved in boots on the ground in Gaza. They don't want to be part of this peace, what he calls peace initiative, because they don't trust the United States and they don't trust Israel. Israel now controls more than half Gaza, right, Dr. Hassouni? Yes. More than. What they call the yellow line. Yes. And they think that this is their security arrangement. It's like their buffer zone. So what are we talking about? Two-state solution? Where is the two-state solution? Where is the international community that shouldered the two-state solution as the only solution to this conflict? So it is for me enigmatic. Either I'm stupid and naive not to understand world politics, or I am blunt enough to expose what Israel and the United States are considering to create a new Middle East that is based on their own national interests. Now here, I have to be not improvising, because I want to be accurate when I talk about the Oasis Peace Plan. So allow me, and I need Helga and me, and our colleague to tell me whether I was right at the end in describing fully what the Oasis Plan is. And I tell you, I'm not here to market the Oasis Plan, and I'm not part of the Schiller Institute. But I'm a supporter of the Schiller Institute because I believe in their plan. So I do it anytime. Even if I'm retired, Helga picks up the phone. She tells me, we want you to come and speak about the Oasis Plan. I'm always ready wherever you want. So that's my commitment, basically, to the Oasis Plan. And I did not decline coming here, although my time is so I'm leaving next Thursday. So I have so many commitments. But I said, this is the speech of the last of the Mohicans. And let me just outline to you in a nutshell, because the Oasis Peace Plan is a big document where it has to be read meticulously. And it needs an economic background to understand the complexity, yet the subtle solution, which is so crystal clear as an objective. I said, when I looked at the Oasis Plan, that there is a great benefit coming from plan to the Middle East region and to that of Gaza. The Oasis Plan presents a transformative vision for the Middle East, built on regional economic integration, water security, and sustainable development. Please focus with me. I need you to know exactly how this plan, and I am summarizing a huge document. And it takes a surgeon to do that, what I call surgical analysis for this document. It aims to replace cycles of conflict with shared prosperity. The plan connects regional economics through energy grids, water networks, transportation corridors, and industrial hubs. This interdependence generates collective incentives for stability, investment, and long-term cooperation. By prioritizing water security and climate resilience on a large scale in terms of desalination, water sharing mechanisms, and you know water is a scarcity in the Middle East, and renewable energy, it tackles water scarcity, improved water stability, strengthens agriculture, reduces migration pressures, and supports sustainable urban development. It reduces drivers of instability, Regional connectivity lowers the cost of conflict and raises the value of peace. The Oasis Plan creates practical avenues of collaboration among Arab states, Israel, and international partners. By focusing on mutual economic gains, it shifts the political dynamics from confrontation toward problem solving and constructive, ambiguous diplomacy. And specifically, when we want to use the Oasis Plan to Gaza, Gaza stands to gain immediate improvements through, first, the desalination plants, stable power generation, upgraded sanitation, and restored infrastructure. It is a path to economic recovery, linking Gaza to regional markets, to the West Bank, through energy, trade, transport corridors, to a sustainable economy. Of course, industrial zones, agricultural revitalization, and job-creating infrastructure projects provide a foundation for long-term stability. It reduces tensions and supports political stabilization. It establishes for future political settlement. The Oasis Plan provides the material infrastructure necessary for governance, mobility, and regional cooperation. The Oasis Plan is a regional stability mechanism that offers a shared vision built on development, partnership, and the tangible benefits of peace. To conclude, it is a regional development plan, which is a vision, a solution to chronic scarcity, like water and electricity. It is a stabilizing framework that reduces tension by creating shared economic interest and practical cooperation. A lifeline for Gaza, providing water, power, reconstruction, job opportunities, and connection to regional markets. A foundation for future peace by improving living conditions and regional interdependence. I believe it is the high time today that this plan should be taken seriously by the international community, and let's not invent new plans because we have already a plan that has been practiced, implemented in China and other parts of the world. It has been a success story. Why can't it be a success story for Gaza and for the Middle East? So we don't need to improvise and to reinvent the wheel while we have a solid plan that really caters to the needs of all the peoples in the region. And that's why I recommend the Oasis Plan. And I will try in my capacity when I go back, maybe I will have, I hope, I will have a meeting with the president and I will introduce this plan to him. Because whether Israel likes it or not, whether the Americans like, Palestinian Authority is going to be part of the reconstruction process. So we have a plan in the authority, we have a plan that was put together with that of Egypt to the international community. But I think the dimension of the Oasis Plan makes it more pragmatic, more practical, as a solution, rather than trying to create new objective conditions and new subjective conditions to synchronize best in order to find a plausible solution. And as I said in the beginning, we cannot give hope. We have to be hopeful, because this is the nature of human beings. We ought to find better conditions. Peace is difficult to attain. War is easy to wage. But if we have the stamina, and if we have the creativity, and we have the incentives, and we have the innovation, and we have the power and the skills to implement our ingenious mind, I think we can find a solution. God gave us this gift of choosing the right things in our lives. and if we believe in the values of humanity, and if I believe that I am a Palestinian with human values and trust that humanity will never leave the Palestinian people continue to suffer and to live under occupation. I plead to the international conscience not only as an emotional request, but as a rational request. There is always a solution to every conflict. Maybe that solution is not 100% pleases you, but it is the way to start. And there is always one step to heaven. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. My pleasure.
Ambassador, and I hope you have a few minutes for questions.
Yes, of course.
And
Difficult questions.
Helga, you can have the honor of asking the first one.
Well, Your Excellency, I'm very happy about your speech because I think it is that attitude of optimism which will make the Oasis Plan come real. My immediate question to you is, you said Pax Americana did not bring good things to the Middle East.
Yes.
Now, there is a new national security strategy just published by the Trump administration, which breaks with previous priorities. It de-emphasizes Europe. It puts the primary emphasis on the Western Hemisphere, and it also decreases the emphasis on the Middle East. So given the changes inside the United States, where because of the protest of a lot of young people on what is happening in Gaza, this had even an influence on the MAGA movement, and there is a certain amount of tension between certain MAGA politicians and President Trump, which are quite intense inside the United States. So what do you think will be the effect in practical terms of the new security strategy for the Oasis Hope?
Well, I have to admit to you, I didn't read the document yet, but I can try to improvise as much as I can. There is a big contradiction today in the United States between the public opinion and that of President Trump's administration. President Trump, unfortunately, is turning out to be a racist supremacy. He doesn't believe in the migration. He doesn't believe in the immigrants. He is slurring everything that is anti-WASP, which is white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And you have seen his campaign against the Somalian congresswoman, where, I mean, the United States is what we call a melange of ethnicities. It is considered to be the melting pot, and now it is turning out to be, you know, a government that is based on religion, color, and race. Now, I don't believe in what the security of the United States in the past has really achieved, because we have seen that the security of the world is controlled by the United States through NATO. We don't see any independence of NATO from that of the United States, and we've seen today an opposing power, which is Russia, Iran, South Korea, and to a certain extent now India is moving in that direction as the counterpart of the hegemony of the United States in the world. So now we are witnessing a rise of multipolarity and not a unipolar power, and this has been a total defiance for America's hegemony, not only militarily, but also economically. You know, if you go today to China, look at their national treasure, they have more trillions of dollars than the United States of America. So the economy is not controlled by the United States anymore, and the dollar is not going to be the international currency. So it's a matter of time. And I tell you, security is totally tied to economic interests. And that's why I believe that no matter what the Americans do, they have to understand that a balance of power is the only way towards security and peace. I think that's a very, very good question. I will start by saying there is a big difference between peace building and peacemaking. Signing a peace treaty does not give you peace and tranquility. It's signing a document. And it's done between governments. But peace building is when you prepare your civil society to connect with the other civil society, where people-to-people interaction creates a modus operandi of conviviality and coexistence. This sustains the peace process. So peace building comes before peacemaking. Because when you build peace, then the sustainability and the longevity of that peace will be based on the mutual interaction, the mutual trust, the mutual non-fear of each other, which makes it plausible and practical. Now, before the Second Intifada, which was in 2002, we had, through what we call the Oslo peace process, total communication on people-to-people and on grassroots levels between Israeli society and that of Palestinian society. It's only in the Second Intifada, when the Intifada became militarized, that we lost our connection, that the Israeli society became leaning towards the right, and that's why we have Netanyahu being elected time and again, because of that society that lost the power of the what we call Peace Now, and that organization has been dwindled. All the liberal parties in Israel have lost, and today what we have is an extreme right-wing public that supports Netanyahu with all his, let's say, faults and deficiencies, because Israelis always get around their leadership during war. During peace, they could be very vociferous in opposing through a democratic electoral process. But during war, they stick to their leadership. And that's why Netanyahu is trying to linger the situation in Gaza to secure next year another elections. And once that is done, I would say the Palestinian issue will be gone in the sky, because Netanyahu believes in not relinquishing 1 inch from the occupied territories. His revisionist father, who was a professor at Hebrew University, taught him this: never give 1 inch of the land of Israel. So he is not a peacemaker. He is a warmonger who believes like a vulture, nurturing himself with conflict and trying to expose always the Israeli public through the fear of Iran's atomic bombs, through the fear of Hamas and other, Islamophobic ideas, to make them cling to him as the only savior for the land of Israel. So he used this psychological approach to retain his power. But I totally believe in what you have said, Mr. Ambassador. I think peace cannot be just signing a document. Peace should be based on reciprocity, on mutual respect of each other, and trying to put a common ground of interest that sustains and makes that peace, the longevity of which will bring security. And security cannot be achieved in the Middle East without resolving the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Maybe this part that I referred to, you were not still here, but I will reiterate again. I always say, and I debated a famous professor called Gideon Fichelson back in 1990.
Called what?
His name is Gideon Fichelson. And we had a debate at the Notre Dame Center in Jerusalem, where the moderator was the Consul General of America called Philip Wilcox. And I'm here on record in what I'm saying. His approach was Gideon, which later was adopted and plagiarized by Shimon Peres, that economic development leads to peace. That economics comes first before any political resolution in conflict. I say there is no harm in having political negotiations with the innovation of economic development in principle, but not one prioritized upon the other. We could have negotiations, and if you have negotiations, what do you have? Ceasefire, right? Peace. And how could you nourish peace and try to encourage people to accept the negotiations with all its ups and downs by improving their economic conditions? When do you have conflict? When there is abject poverty, when there is no symmetry between one society controlling and the other being totally subdued. My argument, back in 1990, which is almost 35 years ago, and I was a handsome young chap at that time, I said politics comes first, then economics. But today, I'm, I think, a little bit more mature to say that one does not precede the other, but they can go in parallel. And this is what we are hoping with the ceasefire that will lead to the national reconstruction and the physical reconstruction of Gaza, where economic development takes place, where job opportunities are created, then this will pave also the way for political resolution. It does not complicate it, but it will pave the way for a subtle resolution in the final analysis. So here I cannot be philosophical by saying which comes first, the Big Bang Theory or the absolute God, like what Hegel taught us. We cannot say that the chicken comes before the egg or the egg becomes before the chicken. So I would say that these questions are like Catholic marriage. They are intertwined, organically intertwined, to the point one complements the other, and vice versa. And that's why when I talk about the Oasis Plan, it's a plan that is complete. There are no loopholes. Maybe the loopholes in the practical implementation of it in certain cases. But as a plan in itself, I think it is worthwhile studying, and it is worthwhile considering. And I'm sure I'm not just talking about Gaza, I'm talking about India in its development, Pakistan in its development, Bangladesh, and all third world countries. You are not third world, but you are big countries, vast countries that you have so many problems in agriculture, in trade, in water salination, in physical development and what have you. So why not take this plan as a pilot Try it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, tant pis, we say in French. To hell with it. But I think it is worthwhile. We cannot always say no, 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 no. Israel has been saying no, 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 no. One day they have to say yes. We, the PLO, said no, 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 no. Whoever thought after 25 years of armed struggle to start believing that pragmatism and political accommodation is the only way out? And we embarked on this when? Almost 37 years ago. And still we are hopeful. With all the ups and downs, with all the complexities of the situation, we are still in a process where we believe eventually peace will prevail and reign supreme. Your question is very important, extremely important. I was one of those who opposed the Abrahamic Accords. And I said this is premature. Given the Israelis the privilege of cooperation with the Arab world, while they have been boycotted by the Arab world for so many years, on a golden platter was given to Israelis while they are subduing the Palestinians and killing us in Gaza. This is wrong. I believe in the Abrahamic Accords when we achieve ceasefire and we achieve peace and we go back to the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative, which was initiated by Saudi Arabia, in the Beirut Summit Conference, where 59 countries have agreed to that. Then we can talk about cooperation. Look, the same goes to Wadi Araba, the peace initiative between Jordan and Israel. Is there, do you think, peace? Do you think the Israelis now roam in the streets of Amman safely? No. No. It's only peace agreement and not peace building. The peoples of the Middle East will accept Israel as a full-fledged legitimate member of the Middle East nation states when they recognize the inalienable rights of the Palestinians to self-determination and to their statehood. Read my lips, and I am a peacenik. And my peace is totally circumvented by the fact that I cannot accept peace while there is occupation. Resistance, not necessarily physical. Non-violent resistance, peaceful resistance, crying out for our inalienable rights in the international arena, in the human rights organizations, in the ICC, ICJ. That is our strategy of fighting Israel and its racist policy in the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem. So we cannot have peace without the deep conviction that peace will come only through concessions on both sides. We made our concessions. We gave Israel 78% of Palestine. What else do they want? We did our share. Israel has to make its choice. And there is no other choice for the existence of Israel. Read my lips. 30 years down the pipeline, if they continue with this hegemonic attitude of controlling and subduing the Palestinians. I always say, you make peace, you agree to peace, you make concession when you are at the crescendo of power. And how do we define power? I came up with a definition of power. Power is the capacity to elicit desired responses. The capacity to elicit desired responses. So diplomacy is the safest way to gain your national objectives rather than going to war. You tell me, from the ancient civilization, From the Sumerian civilization up to now, how many civilizations came to the world and crumbled by creating a prime culture and another civilization? Do you think America will be forever the power that controls the world? Do you think we thought at one time that Islam would be prevalent as a leading civilization for so many centuries, but in the 19th century we saw the emergence of what we call material civilization coming up from Europe and becoming the leading civilization of today. The same contradiction within this civilization will lead to another one. And this is the process of history and change in history. So let us not be object of history, let us be the subject of history and try to be an active player in the history making. I hope this didn't lecture you, and I apologize since I'm a professor. I sometimes don't know when to stop. My apologies.
I think, with thought of what you said of Europe and the present circumstances of the political leadership of Europe, and the totally absence of diplomacy, and the seeming totally absence of capacity, of empathy, of thinking through, of reflecting, of putting yourself in the other's shoes, I think probably we will have to, not sending you back to Jerusalem, but making a European Academy of Diplomacy and then having European leaders coming to school again. Because this idea that you need shared security can only be shared. You can never have it for yourself.
Absolutely.
And if you see what the Europeans right now, they're bumbling around, they don't know what to do. Now we can't even just do what the US is saying. What are we supposed to do? Well, maybe you should listen to these wise words. Maybe you have to take them to school and teach them how does diplomacy work, and the beauties you can actually do with this while Europe still have a capacity right now. I mean, right now the European economy is tumbling down the hills. But still, if Europe would refine its ways, it would actually be able, you would be able to salvage something, I think.
Yes.
And actually, not if it's just left to itself, because then there's no vision, there's no hope, there's no future. But if Europe would actually be engaged in saying, rebuilding up Gaza, but building up Africa, building up the world, then maybe Europe would also be able to find its identity again, as something, not as a war maker,
Yes.
but as a peacemaker. But anyway, Helga, you have?
Well, I would like to thank you very much for almost 2 years of your cooperation with the Schiller Institute on this project. And I think you are aware of the fact that there are many people in the world who have already expressed their endorsement for the Oasis Plan. So we plan to continue this campaign. As a matter of fact, I also want to invite all of you to attend every week, or at least when you have time. Every Friday on 5 o'clock we have a meeting of the International Peace Coalition. And the issue of peace in the Middle East and Gaza is always a topic. We had a lot of, since the question was asked before, we had a lot of pro-peace speakers from Israel, also naturally from Palestine and other Arab countries. So I think that, you know, to strengthen this dialogue is a very important question. So please come to this meeting, because it's a very important way to be in tune with this effort. Otherwise, I just want to say that, you know that we had excellent people endorsing the Oasis Plan, like Dr. Pandor, the former foreign minister from South Africa, and various other leading individuals. So at this point, it was clear that the next step to make the Oasis Plan real would be to have a physical conference, not just online and not just, you know, in private circuits like here, but that we have to find a government, preferably of the Middle East, who would sponsor a conference on the project. because I'm quite certain that if, for example, young people from Palestine, Israel, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan, I mean, these are all countries who had enormous sufferings from interventionist wars. And in many situations, the humanitarian situation is equally precarious, maybe not as bad as Gaza, but Syria is a catastrophe, Yemen is a catastrophe, Afghanistan is still suffering enormously. So if there would be a conference, let's say organized by Jordan, by Egypt, or the Emirates, or any country which is in a position to do that, and you would invite students, you would have animations, you know, with AI, you can make the Oasis Plan real. You know, you could have a vision of how the deserts would be green, how where there is nothing right now, there would be highways and railways, forestry, agriculture, plantations, orchids, because that all would be possible through the Oasis Plan. And then young people would get an idea that this vision is something to fight for their own future, and they could become a leverage on their government to actually move in the direction of supporting it. So I'm actually convinced that the next step has to be such a conference, because just imagine if we would have scholars speaking about it, showing animations, how the entire region from India to the Mediterranean, from the Caucasus to the Gulf states, this would all be green. It would all be, you know, like it used to be in the ancient Silk Road. It was a hub between Asia, Africa, and Europe. And, you know, that way one could then use these videos for education afterwards in universities. So you could really make a total change through having such a conference. And I wanted just to put this idea in your head before you are leaving.
Well taken. Well taken. Well, let me just clinch by saying a few words. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for always been invited to speak. I think this has been a good forum for an ambassador to speak about his country and about the suffering of his people, yet with a hopeful note that there is always a peaceful solution. And there is no other solution except through peace and through political accommodation. We hope all the success, and as I told you, I will be one of your soldiers in terms of supporting the Oasis Plan. And all I can say, that a vision is the motor of development. Without a vision, there is no development. And without taking risks, there is no profit. So we have to be wise, vociferous, deeply convinced in our ideas, open for criticism, open for improvement, because there is no absolute idea. The absolute idea goes to God only, and not to human beings. So there is always certain niches, as we say, for developing. Maybe, I don't promise. I have 2 books to finish, but maybe I will write an article, send it to you, telling you, here are the gaps that we have to fulfill in the Oasis Plan. And I promise you that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
We have just a couple of gifts for you. This is a Schiller Institute certificate of appreciation to the ambassador in appreciation of your cooperation with the Schiller Institute and for promoting the Oasis Plan for Peace through Development.
Thank you so much. Can we have Helga here?
Yes.
And you?
And this is I don't know if you have this already.
But I will take it with me.
Yeah, this is the Arabic version of the first
report that we made, the new Silk Road becomes the world land bridge. And then
حسوني تعالوا هون.
you get some chocolate.
Oh,
And this is a CD that Farida was involved in arranging with Albanian classical music.
very nice. Thank you so much. Please, Helga, we have to hold this together. Yes? Helga, I think there should be, I would like just to say one word, if you allow me to do so.
Please.
I think this forum, you should open to all ambassadors to come and give their experiences at their countries in the process of development so we can learn from each other. Right? Regardless of the Oasis Plan. Just to share their history and their experience in developing their land and how they can learn from the Oasis Plan to improve their plans of development. I think this should be a good forum for them. That's my recommendation.
Yes, we will do that, and I think we are already in the process of doing it with some African nations, because, as you know, Dr. Pandor said that
Yes.
the Oasis Plan and the Africa 2063 plan are identical in outlook, and they should be looked at together. So maybe that would be also a topic for one of the future
Excellent.
meetings.
I wish you all the success. I wish my colleagues, the ambassadors, all the success. Denmark is not a la-la land. It has been very difficult for me to deal with such a conservative government, but I'm sure that you can improve your bilateral relations. And please, always, in your speeches, in your deliberations with the foreign ministry, don't forget Palestine.
Yeah.
Put this somewhere.
Thank you. Very nice. I will cherish this.